Hello, folks. Another episode of Burning Platform, and it's a real honor and a pleasure to have my friend John from Salesforce. John, welcome and congratulations. First of all, you've got a new role. So let's start off with that. Describe your new role, and then we'll kick into the world of analysts that you and I deal with all the time.
Oh, that sounds good. All right, thanks, Vinnie. Thanks for having me on the show. So I'm John Taschek at Salesforce. I actually don't have a new role. I've had the same role pretty much for 20 years. I have a new title, but it's Chief Market Strategy Officer of Salesforce, and it actually is very flattering. And the vain part of me thinks that having chief in the title is a good thing versus something that was a little more abstract, which was SVP of market strategy. But hey, I'm doing the same thing over the last almost 21 years now, and I'm enjoying this ride as much now, or more, actually more now than ever.
Living the dream force, right?
Living the dream force. That's right. Thank you, Vinny. Thank you for staying on point.
Uh, So spend a minute or two on Salesforce. It has been an amazing ride, right? And even with the bumps in the Silicon Valley the last couple of years, you guys are still doing pretty darn well. So let's start off there. I mean, and you must take a little bit of credit for some of that. So let's start there.
Well, I try not to take credit for anything, actually, Vinny, but there's it's just so many moving parts and so many things that the company was so set up well to do from the beginning. And I had a role, but I'm not going to take credit for any part. But when I started at the company, there were just a roughly 300 people, probably a little more, and it's now grown to over 70,000 employees. I think maybe we went public in 2004, a year after I started, and maybe our revenue was 70 million. I don't remember back that far, but definitely it's been an amazing journey, amazing ride that I've been able to be part of. Just thankful and grateful for the whole company, especially Mark Benioff, who as the main co-founder of the company, along with Parker, and the other two. I just really appreciate and grateful every minute for it.
You're being modest. You're being really modest. You guys have been just a rocket ship, and you should take a little more credit. But let's switch gears to I know we want to talk about how the industry analyst world keeps changing. I'm sure other people deal with the Wall Street buy and sell side analysts. Let's focus on the industry analysts. One of the neat things that you've done differently than other vendors is, I think very early on you caught on to the fact that we were getting a new group of boutiques and independent analysts. A lot of the other vendors still cling to my former employer and partner in Forrester and so on, the institutional analysts. So talk a little bit about what made you different from the other vendors. How did you decide to, hey, look, this is worth watching, worth investing in, and so on?
Yeah, I was a bit fortunate that we didn't have any official analyst relations program at Salesforce when we joined. And the company was small enough so that anyone in product management or product marketing or the executives interacted with the analysts. But there were only so many who covered us. And there are reasons for it. A lot of the analysts that would have covered us were software analysts. And, of course, we had a big tagline of no software. So it was I could see, the pain points of trying to establish an analyst relations program. And when I was hired to do competitive intelligence. And that was it's a very broad term. And it wasn't about being a corporate spy. It was about understanding what our competitors were doing and looking at the market and seeing what was addressable in the market and what our opportunity was. Well, I don't know, it was less than a year into it when I was asked to take on the analyst relations. But we only had one person doing it at that point. Her name was Amy Lynch, and and it just was, we just didn't have a big program, but the company was moving so rapidly. So when I took it over, I started talking to analyst relations professionals, people with director of analyst relations in their titles. And I think I interviewed about 40 people, and they all said the same thing. You have to tier the analyst firms, and you have to pay your dues to Gartner, and you have to pay your dues to and they're not suggesting pay for play it in any capacity. It's pay your dues. It's
Yeah.
like you have to, that those are the ones you have to work with, are the biggest ones. And I disagreed with that. So we ended up not hiring anyone for quite a while in analyst relations. While I thought about it and reflected, now I had come from the press. I wasn't a journalist, but I worked for PC Week magazine, and which became eWeek, and I wrote for PC Magazine and others, Computer Shopper, long gone now, but actually it may still be alive online, but I haven't checked. But and in the press, I felt like I understand the world of the analyst, because I was kind of like an analyst, but working in the press. And I said, it shouldn't be like this. It should be based on the knowledge, the curiosity of the individual and not the firm. And I thought that it's, instead of tiering the analyst firms, why don't we tier the analysts? So it's and then that opens up the world quite a bit. You get away from just Gartner, just Forrester, just IDC, and you look at all the independent analysts who have a unique point of views and different circumstances. Like some of them were former analysts, some of them were analysts at firms before, some of them were at companies, some of them might be vendors. Like they have unique points of view that I really wanted to learn from. So it was my own curiosity about what this was and the impact. And the company was still, new enough, being about 4 years old from the date of, inception, I guess, that we could learn a lot from individual analysts. And I've never shifted that position. It's, there are analysts who are really great. They don't have to be at any particular firm. And, then if we give them information, they give us feedback, we can take the feedback and we can make a difference.
That is a refreshing point of view. Great to hear you say that. Now, when did you start to feel pressure? Hey, you got to work with the big firms. Was it like
I never felt pressure.
even
I
even
never.
when you went into multi-million-dollar company?
Oh, well, yeah, because there's always, in a vendor, there's especially one, I think all vendors, but especially ones that are more established. There are very specific documents out there. The Magic Quadrant, as an example, or the Forrester Wave, or market scopes, escapes and market scopes, and like all kinds of evaluations. And I, well, going back to the point about working with individual analysts, I didn't really care about the evaluations as much. We didn't have to. We weren't in a lot of them, but I didn't care about them as much. But as the company got bigger and we started to become successful, because I always had a 3-year outlook on how to, like, how we should balance our product direction and influence the analyst, so to speak, to get to the point where we were leaders. And then we were growing so fast that we became leaders. And at some point, I'd say maybe 10 years ago, they became much more important to the company because it showed and validated our strategy. And if there was ever an evaluation we didn't do as well on, there was consequences. And analyst relations, competitive intelligence, their teams typically are they work best when they don't get credit for winning and they take the blame for losing. And if you're confident enough in your strategy, you can function like that. And so I'm fine with that. When you work in the press, you get a bit hardened, for things you write, especially from the vendors, but also from from the readers. And I always felt confident in our strategy, and I never looked at it a particular document. I used to call it "Don't manage to a document, manage to the analyst," right? The expectations and the product direction. The document is already going to be old by the time it's new. That's the way I look at it. The problem is they last a long time. When they get into the hands of marketing, they're used for lead generation, which like pushes the vendors to do more with lead generation and more winning. But I think I've just been established enough and fortunate enough to be at the company long enough where, yeah, it's important, but it's not the most important thing.
I had a session with Paul, our friend Paul, and
Mhm.
we talked about he let me talk more than uh, he listened. And I made several points about how the whole institutional analyst model has really not served the industry quite well the last few years. In my view, analysts need to lead the market. They need to define where the market's headed. If it's verticalizing, you need to be moving into those areas. You need to talk about global trends and all that. And I think they become too static. They've kind of established that this is my ERP magic quadrant, this is my SAP magic quadrant, stuff like that. And markets move are very fluid. You gotta keep evolving that, and they haven't done enough of that, right? So I really like your approach. It's refreshing to hear somebody in your side say that, hey, look, we don't evaluate the document, we evaluate the person behind it. So one
Yeah, it's
go ahead.
it's been tough, on your point though. It is tough to in the last few years to, go beyond and predict what's happening. The changes are coming faster than ever, and they've always been fast. And yeah, it's difficult, and there's a lot of disruption out there, which is also opportunity. And it's our job to educate on our vision. It's our job to be educated on what our vision could be, and it's our job in market strategy to educate our company on aligning those visions and making sure they're the same, because we're all in it together ultimately.
And this is one thing that annoys some vendors because I'll be constantly pushing them. Or I'll talk to you about what are you doing in this vertical? What are you doing in this region of the world and all that? Salesforce vertically has been very good about keeping me updated on what you're doing in auto, what you're doing in media, and so on. Most of the vendors don't have much this, so they don't want to hear about it. They don't want to be questioned about it, right? I think from a globalization perspective, most US vendors are pretty weak. I'm seeing some massive opportunities open up, in places like Kenya and so on. Not huge countries, but they're fast growing, right? And then I'm seeing multinationals move around because they either are leaving countries because of inflation or because of supply chain risks. They're trying to balance it out. Portfolios are evolving quicker than I've ever seen, country portfolios, right? And then a lot of these countries have the top biggest 500,000 companies. Everybody wants to do business with them, right? Think of China's top 500 or India's top 500. I don't think US vendors are doing enough to be positioned in many of these markets. So, but you know, I think vertically, I think you're doing pretty well. Globally, I think you need to reach out a little bit more.
Well, it's very hard to get insight on the global markets. You can get market share. You can get labor statistics, like maybe there's shifts in hiring and look at trends like that. But it's not easy to get country-specific data from analysts. It's
There's a,
very
there's a
specific.
category, there's a category of analysts called global geopolitical advisors, right? You can get country risk, you can get country level analysis there.
You can
And
get that data behind it. It's really hard to get the software consumption, the software
true,
usage, the
true.
opportunity. And yeah, it sounds like easy enough that if you could pull all the data and look up a Tableau visualization of it, you could probably make some bets.
This is where the hyperscalers have done much better than the software vendors. If you were to look at where all the big guys have data centers, you'll be shocked at their global reach. And in doing so, what they've done is they've created a DevOps community in these countries around their products, right? So I think the software industry has been shy about doing that. Next wave, right? Growth opportunities.
Now, I'm looking forward to working with you on that, Vinnie. There's probably all kinds of opportunities out there that we're not doing. I mean, right now we see that the total
Well,
addressable market for software is huge just in the regions we're in, and but we can't keep a blind eye to any opportunities out there for sure.
and this has been an issue with most US vendors, is they start off in English-speaking countries. They're very comfortable with England and Australia, maybe South Africa. When it comes to foreign language, when it comes to right to left script and all that, haven't been as quite as, and that market. So you're seeing players like Zoho go into those markets. They're not going to compete for bigger customers like you, but they're getting into the core middle market of those countries and locking it
Now,
up.
one of the most unique things that we did early on was the translation workbench. I'm guessing that was 2004, 2005. And we had Unicode, so we could do multiple languages. Right to left came a little bit later, but in the same instance, in the same, you could look at your sales, your cases, your campaigns in the same instance. You could have multiple languages, and Salesforce would do the translation, and then if it was custom to you, you could do the translation, and it would be the same data because we're a metadata driven thing. That was a huge competitive advantage back then.
That was
It's
2004, right? It's what SAP calls internationalization. Okay,
Mhm.
it is, but that's commoditized today. 20 billion devices supported, right? Unicode has, I don't know, 3,000 characters around the world. It supports God knows how many emojis and so on. Now the big push is around localization, taxes,
Yeah, compliance and governance
scalability.
always are a big part of that.
Yeah, and SAP is way ahead of others in terms of country support down to that level. But opportunity for you, not necessarily in taxes, but they don't have the CRM market cornered by any means. There's opportunities there in the order processing and the invoicing area and so on. But one other thing that you do very well is you've told me, Vinny, I'm on the product side of the house. Most analyst relations report to marketing, right? And so their incentives are very and penalties are very different. It's all about how many mentions are you getting us? Where am I positioned on the Magic Quadrant and so on? You're able to influence your product a lot more by listening more than just pushing. Yours is a pull model versus a push model. I don't want to speak for you, but it sounds like that has been very helpful for you.
Well, listening is the key before you even get to any of that. Listening to the opinions of your fans, your detractors, the neutral, the people who don't know you at all. Listen, and you can learn a lot just by listening. And yes, we're in the product team. There is only a brief period of time that I worked for the CMO, but it was as a separate entity funded by marketing, but not driven by it. So we have an alignment document called the vision, the V2MOM, vision, values, methods, obstacles, and measurements. And I had my own. It corresponded to the corporate one, not the marketing one necessarily, right? I mean, there's of course there's some overlap there, but the only reason that went to marketing was because there is a budget required for analyst relations, and marketing typically has a bigger budget. But I pushed very early on to be on the product side because being closer to the product gives you a whole bunch of benefits when you're talking to analysts. Access to the product team very directly, influencing the product team, learning from the product team, more meetings, more collaboration with the product teams, which are developing the strategy. I was very against having it be in marketing or comms, wherever that might sit in an organization, because that's much more outbound. And I didn't want to be a pitch factory of just saying stuff about what we did and how great we are, because we're going to do that anyway. We don't have to only do that. We're always going to be talking about we're great, but we listen at the same time. And customers don't like it, analysts don't like it. I personally don't like it. If you can imagine on the other side, an analyst, well, of course you can imagine, you hear a lot of hype. There's market hype, there's macro hype, there's vendor hype. And when you put all that together, it all blurs and everyone kind of sounds the same. But if you listen, then you could point to specific parts where an analyst helps the product or the company. It just works better. So having the access, direct access to the product team, connects the analyst to the product team as well, not just through us. We're not an intermediary there. We're part of a more holistic system.
You know, that's one thing about Mark that I've told several people about is he's a damn good listener. I've seen it many customers, you know, he'll go meet an executive for half an hour, or whatever. A couple of days later, he'll have a product idea for them, right? So that is a great trait. Not too many companies listen either to analysts or to their customers enough. It's mostly push, push, push. You know, at Gartner, we used to always say, people want our influence or do they want our intelligence, right? And I have been a little bit frustrated. I think it's become a little too much influence versus intelligence. People don't listen enough to, people don't call me enough to say, Vinnie, tell me what's going on in Dubai. Tell me what's going on in the energy sector specific to this, right? But they'll call me all the time. Oh yeah, I have an energy practice. I want to present to you about that, right? So you see the subtle difference.
Mm-hmm.
It swung a little too much towards influence, but glad to hear you're part of the product area and you know you take ideas back. So that's the way it should be.
Yeah, and then on the vendor side, I'm not defending vendors, but we don't know what we don't know. So if an analyst knows something, we need to, hopefully the relationships are strong enough that we just learn it through regular discussions at events or through, you know, some kind of briefing. But if we don't know something, we have to learn it too. And, you know, where do you find it? You know, there's so much out there. And then it has to, you know, match up with our priorities as well. But we can listen and say this should be a priority, and then that starts the discussion. But we don't know what we don't know. I'm talking about all vendors. There's a side on the analyst side that should be pushing information a bit more instead of us having to go and query for it. Because again, you can't ask questions you don't know, you know, if you don't know what the question is.
Well, you know, again, like I say, it comes down to one-on-one conversations. I don't think we have enough in the industry. And
I
then,
agree.
and then vendors bitch and moan, he publicly made us look bad and whatever. It shouldn't be that way. You shouldn't be surprised either way, right? So that's another area both sides can work on. What else? What else you see in the analyst world that annoys you, irritates you, or impresses you?
That sounds like a
Some of them,
loaded
some of them
question.
negative. Let's say anything positive.
All right. What impresses me?
No, start with you. What annoys you?
What annoys me? Oh, there's too much segmentation in the industry analysts, and it divides the world in an arbitrary fashion. Somebody could be covering marketing, but will refuse to talk about commerce plus marketing. Someone may talk about data fabrics, but not understand, a metadata-driven architecture, how apps interact with that, or how customers interact with the apps. Those things annoy me. It seems arbitrary, but those are set up. I mean, they're defined markets, and we participate in them. At the same time, it really takes a long time to develop new markets when this world is changing very rapidly. And so that annoys me, but I'm not annoyed at the analyst for that. I'm kind of annoyed that it just that's the way it is. And there's very little to change it rapidly when this world is changing rapidly. I think the other thing that annoys me is, I feel like contract negotiations get in the way of relationships, and therefore the walls between sales and analyst firms are a little strange.
You mean
But
contract negotiations with your customers, right? The feedback or
both, yeah, both our contract negotiations with the firms, it it's an annoyance that doesn't, I don't think it actually exists, that these firms are established for a reason. There are strong walls between sales and analysts and research. And I fully believe that, but it just seems like they become obstacles to relationships at times. I don't want to give any specifics, but it just seems like that happens once in a while. And I feel like analysts and products should look beyond all that. And this world is changing rapidly. What is it going to look like? Focus on that and have discussions about that. I was a little cryptic there. We might have to
No, no,
delete
no,
that
no, no,
entire
no, no.
part.
I spent 5 years in Gartner. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, too many silos and yeah.
Silos and segments. Ultimately that's what annoys me. I guess also what annoys me is especially in the bigger firms, they're really great analysts who are really doing great research. But overall, the bigger firms are seen as safety nets for decision makers.
Great point.
And
No, the reality is Gartner was always a more IT centric firm, right? They were more about speeds and fees. They were much more comfortable dealing with the CIO. When I got there in '95, that was their big foray into applications. And for a 5, 6 year period, we were pretty done. We coined the ERP term. We were pretty influential in the CRM world, the supply chain world, and so on. It's gotten away from that. It's back to its IT roots. So, to your point, they need to be leading a lot more on functional thought leadership and so on, and they don't do enough of that.
well, it's all there. I mean, Gartner has an amazing number of analysts who do great research, and I mean, it's the size of the firm. I think the overall perception is what I'm talking about, and then how do we talk to those analysts, and I just make the assumption that if we're talking to an analyst, there's at least 10x back channel conversations going on that we're not part of, and we have to learn what those conversations are. We want to know the overall feel so we can be intuitive about this, and so it becomes a bit difficult, but that's the job. So we take it, and we take it with a lot of verve.
Well, I wanted one or two annoyances, and you came up with four. So make up for it by talking
sorry
about what impresses you in Alice.
Well, in those annoyances, I said the impressive part. So I'm impressed on the impressed with the dedication and the curiosity and the research, the ability to produce data and posts on this market. It's it. I just don't think our company would be the same without this kind of these kind of people, behind it, the analysts behind it. And so I'm really impressed. Now we're at a time of, disruption with, generative AI, and it's moving very rapidly, and it's not just confined to tech, it's global and it's pervasive and it's personal. And the analysts are usually way ahead on this, at least the thought leadership. I think they could do even more, and I'm looking forward to it because use cases are going to come, really creative opportunities. It's going to be very collaborative, um, vendor, analyst, customer. There's going to be like a lot of learning and a lot of real great insight coming out. So I'm really impressed with that.
The functional side doesn't evolve quick enough. The verticals, the geographies, the thought leadership on the business side is lacking on our side. But you know, it
Well, it's really hard. It's really difficult to make predictions. 1.5 years ago, people knew about generative AI. There were researchers researching it. There were analysts covering it. But just one kind of interface and a bunch of LLMs changed the world. And it's so no one predicted it a year and a half ago what we'd be right now. But I think we're at the point where predictions can come and they'll probably be true, because it's just moving so rapidly and there's a lot of experimentation going on.
well, so here's something that'll hopefully raise the respectability of industry analysts. I'm working on a thriller. It is a new foray for me. I've never written a fiction book. I have a co-author who's a technology marketing person, and she and I, it's about a Silicon Valley billionaire who disappears. Okay. And this guy, Patrick, the analyst, worked for the company, is now an analyst covering that company, and he jumps in and helps the FBI identify a whole bunch of suspects and motives, and so it's all about solving the disappearance.
What a great idea. I wish I had that idea. The industry analyst becomes like Jack Ryan or somebody like that.
Not quite, but we go through all the suspects. There's Chinese intelligence is one suspect, the mob is another suspect, the estranged wife is another suspect. So we go through the whole what the analyst mindset is and how he can help them through the thinking. So hopefully that'll raise the stature of analysts a little bit more.
Are you using GPT to write it?
No, we're
You don't
not.
need. Already written almost 10 books, right? How many books have you written, Vinnie?
This will be my 10th book if it gets done. But John, this has been fantastic. Any final thoughts?
Oh, I think it's going to be a great year. It's going to be there's just so much technology and innovation happening, and I think that this is the year that the vendors who are trusted are going to really take a more prominent spot in thought leadership going forward. And I think that it's not at any risk of the smaller companies innovating and creating great new technologies, because it's just really an open, it's Wild West a bit, I guess, on what can happen. At the same time, there's going to be regulations and compliance, and how much you can push the boundaries of what's happening in the industry with technology, meeting the risks, regulations, compliance, all the local laws. It's going to be really interesting. It's also going to be the year that the analysts are going to help us at Salesforce the most.
It is a tricky time, this move away from, not away, but certainly balancing transaction processing with the new analytical world, AI just being one manifestation, is not every vendor is going to make the transition easily. So a lot of people
No,
need a lot of
no, and then we're going to rely on the analysts to separate the differences, and we need that. We also need the analysts more than ever for helping to build the technologies, prioritizing the right priorities. We're a software vendor. We have, 10 years ago, I said we were no software vendor, but we're a software vendor. We can make changes very quickly. We can change our priorities, and we've done that over the last year. It's just going to be even faster going forward, and it's why it's so exciting.
And you guys had the focus on trust and data and so on. I think a lot of vendors are being very cavalier about data. I think the pushback is going to come from buyers who go, I want to monetize my data, guys. Don't just use the damn thing and pretend that you respect my data. So that's another major trend that's going to emerge.
It's a slippery slope to monetize your data, because then you're mining your customers' data, and you don't want to do that. But
Well, no,
you brought
customers will monetize it and say,
customers are doing it. I know, yeah, and they can do it for more, specific, better hyper personalization, and they should, because right now the state of personalization, not the state of the art, the state of personalization is kind of mass personalization, I guess, where it's semi personalized and there's like lots of data that forms what a person is. But when you get more specific and more granular without offending or breaking the trust, bond that you have with a customer, it does change for the better the way marketing, commerce, sales, service, all of them, the entire CRM category does.
John, when it comes to customers, products, assets, those three categories, customers have way, way more data than vendors do, right? And so when we're talking about generative AI and so on, it's very data hungry. It's very specific data hungry. And so customers have a huge, huge advantage coming up.
Well, now I can pitch a little bit about Salesforce, is that we understand that. And that's what Data Cloud is. We know customers have all this data. It's structured, it's unstructured, it's random, it's in conversations, it's in different places. They don't know where it is many times. And if they do, it's very difficult to create very strong ties to the data without having any real normalization or rationalization of all the data. And so that's the whole. We have 4 pillars at Salesforce. Data is the first, and with data, when you combine it and you mesh it and it works, it feeds your AI, which then in turn feeds the information back into data. It makes your data better. So we have data, AI, CRM, and trust. Those are the 4 pillars of Salesforce. And what you just said is I completely agree with it.
David Schmeier shared at Salesforce the numbers that Data Cloud has grown just in a year. Mind-boggling what you guys are collecting. So good for you.
Yeah, thank you. That is something I will not take credit for, but Steve Fisher and David Schmeier and the engineering team, Srini and everybody, MK, you've met all of them. Just brilliant minds working on this, and it's a very difficult problem. But I feel like we're so far ahead that it's just going to be a great growth opportunity.
You have some smart people working for Salesforce. Understand today.
Yeah, hopefully there are a few. No, there's definitely smartest company. It's who else can do this stuff? This is complicated thing. It's a complicated thing, and to innovate at the same time we're supporting all the customers that we do. It's crazy hard, but we're doing it.
Well, keep doing what you're doing. You know, I like your humility. I like the fact that, you know, you look beyond just the traditional sources of analysis. I like the fact that you take input back to the product engineers and so on. So you're doing things very differently. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you, Vinny. And thanks. Congratulations on 20 years of a little over 20 years now, I guess, um, of being independent. And thanks for all the support you've given us and the advice you've given us over the years. Your questions at every Industry Analyst Summit is just like brilliant all the time.
Well, that's another area you're different. People call me and yell at me. You're thanking me. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you, Vinny.